Hey guys, Will Duffy here. I just wanted to make this video. Countering Christianity, I don't know your real name, that's your Facebook name. And I got involved in a discussion along with Trey about the synoptic problem. And I'm not even yet convinced that there is a synoptic problem. And so when people bring this up, I ask them to just show it to me. And it's always interesting what happens. Isaac, I think it's Coverstone, showed me something within the last couple of months, and I didn't see evidence of the synoptic problem in what he showed me. Just so you guys know a little bit about me, I'm a very independent thinker. You're not going to ever convince me by talking about some long-standing tradition. You're not going to convince me by saying such and such scholar or expert says this. And you're also not going to convince me by talking about some sort of a consensus among scholars. The reality is longstanding traditions have been wrong. You and I will probably not agree on the definition of scholar. I believe that that is very subjective. And then when it comes to a consensus, that's really meaningless in my experience. You know, if 51 men hold to something and they're all quote unquote experts and 49 hold to something different, you can walk around talking about a consensus, and I just don't buy that. So anyway, that's just who I am as a person. So I just want to see the evidence. I have no problem admitting to a synoptic problem. Just show it to me. With that said, Countering Christianity gave me a specific passage, which I was asking for. So thank you for that. And we're going to look at it together, and you guys tell me what you think. And by the way, try to look at this without a bias. So for example, if you hold to a Markan authority, try to set that aside when you look at this, because if you hold to a Markan authority, you're going to interpret the text a certain way. Again, I don't have a position yet on Markan authority or Matthean authority, and looking forward to David Paulman's new videos coming out on that. But the jury's still out for me with the synoptic problem. And so anyway, let's go ahead and dive in. And again, I didn't pick these verses. Countering Christianity did. I'm going to share my screen so we can look at this. I went ahead and plotted this out in Excel. I love Excel. The translations are mostly mine, so if you see any issues, let me know. I'm a beginning Koine Greek student, but these were very easy to translate with the help of an interlinear. So here's what we have here. We're going to start with we're looking at Matthew 9, 5 through 6, Mark 2, 9 through 11, and Luke 5, 23 through 24. I will mention that when I started looking at these two verses, I noticed that the previous verse in each section was left out. I called Countering Christianity on this because it didn't make any sense. What was left out was actually literally part of Jesus' quote. And so this example that was being given to me to show the synoptic problem literally left out part of a quote. And so that seemed to me to be cherry picked. Countering Christianity did tell me that he got this from a book. And so I am going to show you that whoever wrote that book left out the previous verse on purpose, which is fascinating to me. So here we go. Let's start by, looking at these three passages together. So first we have Matthew use gar. By the way, the interlinear I use does not have breathing marks or accents, so I'm going to botch the pronunciations. My apologies on that. So anyway, Matthew uses gar, Mark and Luke don't. So for those who are trying to tell me that there's a synoptic problem, I want to understand how you interpret the fact that Matthew uses gar and Mark and Luke do not. Then we have this next phrase, tiestin eukapoteron epain, which is easier to say. There's agreement among all three gospels there. Then next we have to paralutiko, which is to the paralytic, that only Mark uses. So again, if you believe in the synoptic problem, I want to know why you think Mark has those two words and Matthew and Luke doesn't. I predict, as we look at just this passage here, that you will use arguments that contradict, meaning you're going to say in this example, it's because of X. And then in another example, you're going to say it's because of Y. I just don't think you're going to be able to demonstrate, at least with this passage, that there's a synoptic problem. Then we got Apheontai, Soy, Hai, Hamartii, He, Epain, and then Egerai. So all of that is the same. And then again, Mark adds a phrase, Kai Haran Suton, which is, and take up your. And again, I want to know why Mark has that in Matthew and Luke don't. What is your opinion on that? I forgot Krabaton for the couch there. Then we have Kai Peripate and walk. Then we come down here, Hina de edete hati exousion eche hachlias to anthropu. Okay, great. All of that is the same. I should mention, by the way, that I expect quotes to have agreement in the synoptics, because when you're quoting someone, it's super important that you quote them accurately. Today, if we go look at a bunch of books that are quoting, Martin Luther King Jr. or Patrick Henry or Abraham Lincoln, all those quotes are the same, but we don't say that they're all literarily dependent upon one another. They're all the same because they're trying to get the quote right. So anyway, that's just kind of a side note, that I would love to see better examples that are not quotes, but whatever. Now we have something very interesting here. We have the exact same words. I'll start with Matthew, epites, geis, aphiane, hamartias. That's the same words, but Mark has a different order. So Mark has aphiane, epites, geis, hamartias, and then Luke has the same order as Matthew. So again, I ask you, what does that mean in your opinion if you believe there is a synoptic problem? Why do Matthew and Luke agree with one another and Mark disagrees on the order? We keep going. Matthew uses tate for then, Mark and Luke do not. So again, I'm curious, if you believe there's a synoptic problem, why does Matthew use tate? Then we have another interesting one, which is lege. So Matthew and Mark both use lege and Luke does not. Uh-oh, what does that mean? Again, if we're going to be trying to be consistent here, I'm curious, what does it mean that Matthew and Mark agree and Luke does not with lege? Then Luke uses a pain, and so a pen, so a little bit of a different way of saying it there in terms of tense. Then we have to paralutiko, which Matthew and Mark use that phrase, which is to the paralytic, whereas Luke uses paralelumino, which is paralyzed. So again, why here? We're in the same sentence. Do Matthew and Mark have agreement and Luke does not? I just don't think you're going to be able to make a consistent case. Let's continue. We've got down here on this bottom one, we've got soy, lego, agerai, kai. And now we have Mark and Luke agreeing and Matthew does not. And again, why? What does that mean? And I think when we look at the answer, we're going to actually end up more confused. Matthew uses egerthes. Then we have Haran, which is Matthew and Mark both use that word. Luke does not. Luke uses haras. So again, why do Matthew and Mark agree there and Luke does not? Then we've got this super interesting one right here. We have three different words from the three different synoptics. Matthew is su, tain, clinane. Mark is ton, krabaton, su, and Luke is ta, clinidion, su. So these are different words. Yes, they mean similar things, but why? So again, what's the rationale and the reasoning there as to who's using who and who's dependent upon who, and why are they all using different words? Then we've got kai, hupage. Again, Matthew and Mark agree here, and Luke does not, using paru'u. And then the end is ace tone oikon su, which is in agreement. So again, please explain to me what you're seeing here, because I just don't see something that you're going to be able to use that's consistent. For example, if you say Matthew and Luke do X and Mark does Y, that means this. I don't think you're going to be able to then make that consistent in literally 2 sentences of text. By the way, when I ask for people to demonstrate the synoptic problem for me, I'm expecting paragraphs, not 2 sentences. Now, that gets me to the most interesting point here, which is that Jesus' statement, we're talking in the red letters here, was intentionally, now I'm judging motives, was intentionally cut off because it doesn't back this supposed synoptic problem. And again, I'm not claiming that Countering Christianity did that, but the example where he got this from in the book left it out. So I didn't leave it out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the beginning of Jesus' statement, which is Matthew 9:4, Mark 2:8, and Luke 5:22. This is simply the preceding verse of the other 2 verses that we looked at in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which again, I think was definitely left off on purpose, because how are you possibly going to make a case of a synoptic problem when we add this in? Let's jump in here. So Matthew and Mark start with kai, but Luke uses epignus. Wow, what does that mean? By the way, he uses de epignus. So essentially, Luke is saying but knowing, whereas Matthew and Mark are saying and. Mark uses outheos, and to show immediately. Matthew and Luke do not. What does that mean? And then Matthew uses idon, and Mark uses epignus. So we're talking different words here. And then again, remember, Luke used de epignus. He put epignus first. So there's more of a meaning of but from out of Luke versus and with Matthew and Mark. So why the differences there? So there, it's fascinating. Epignus, it's separated because I didn't want to change the order of the Greek. But now we have Mark and Luke using the same word and Matthew using a different word, whereas the kai was Matthew and Mark using the same word and Luke used de. Then we've got ha huios, which is just Jesus. Now we have another phrase with Mark that we don't have with Matthew and Luke. To, pneumati, autu, hati, utos. So why does Mark use that and Matthew and Luke do not? Then we've got a little bit of an interesting thing here. We've got different words again. So Matthew uses tas and thumeses, and then Mark is dialogizantai, and then Luke is tus dialogismus. So these are different words that have different meanings. There's a similar root word with Mark and Luke, so you could maybe try to argue something there, which is more of a more translated reason or reasonings. But you've got enthumeses from Matthew, which means thoughts. So again, why do Mark and Luke agree here, at least on the root word? And why is Matthew different? I think you're going to struggle here. And then Matthew and Luke use auton, which means of them, and Mark uses iautois. So why is that? We come down here to the bottom. A pain, they all use the word said, but then we have Matthew using hina. He's the only one that uses hina, which means in order that it may be. Luke is the only one that uses pros, which means toward. And then Mark and Luke both use a similar word, autois versus autus. And so what is the explanation there? Why should I, reading this in the Greek, by the way, I forgot to mention that when I ask people to point out, to show me the synoptic problem, they love showing me the English. They love getting English Bibles out and highlighting them in different colors. The reality is we can't use the English. We have to use the Koine Greek here. So if I'm looking at this in the Koine Greek, why should I think there's a synoptic problem? I just want to see it. Then we've got T for Y. And then again, we've got different words here. So Matthew says humes and thumes they, whereas Mark says tauta dialogizeste, and Luke uses the same word. But it's interesting that Mark uses tauta, that's a demonstrative pronoun there, but Luke doesn't. So the question here is, why are Mark and Luke using the same word and Matthew's using a different word? And why is Mark using a demonstrative pronoun and Matthew and Luke are not? And then check this out. Matthew uses panera, which means evil, and Mark and Luke don't. So what does that mean? How should we interpret that? And then the end is just in your hearts, entice cardiais humon, in the hearts of you. So again, I'm open. Everybody needs to hear that. I am open to seeing a synoptic problem, but you can't just say there's a synoptic problem because tradition says so and it's been that way for a long time. You can't say there's a synoptic problem because quote unquote scholars and experts agree on this. I just want to see it. Like, it should be pretty easy to show me. And if this was a bad example, then maybe give me a better one. But I just really struggle if this is the best example that there's a synoptic problem, convincing me with this that there is. So anyway, I hope this helps. Really appreciate the conversation in the group and look forward to hearing responses on this. So thanks, everybody.